main problems with China's environment at the moment can be put in two groups. One is the problems of consumption, the other of waste. So in other words, in and out. In terms of out, first of all, waste and pollution, I think China has a very visible problem. More than half of China's rivers are not fit to drink. And something like a fifth are not fit for any use at all. The air quality is causing hundreds of thousands of deaths every year. These problems are well known, and my hope is that China has now reached the stage of economic development where other countries were able to put more money and more political will into dealing with these problems.
中国目前呢，其实环境的挑战是巨大的，巨大的在于呢，无论是自己跟自己在自己的发展过程当中相比，还是跟中国本身的环境问题的这种影响的范围相比，在国际社会当中，中国就说，中国现在目前的环境的状况、环境的质量以及环境污染呢这个状况对全球带来的影响是巨大的。那在这个过程当中呢，也不奇怪说为什么会形成今天这样一种局面，中国30多年前决定开始改革开放，我们基本上呢走了一个极其快速的这么一个发展的过程当中，在这快速发展过程当中，尤其是工业化，尤其是重工业化的发展过程。那么在这个过程当中呢，毫无疑问，当你的大门敞开的时候，当你在当时呢3年前对这个环境很多的问题的意识是不清楚的时候，那么你这个门槛设的是相对比较低的，甚至说有些东西是没有什么门槛的，所以什么好的坏的东西就一起涌到了这个国度。这样一来呢，就说为什么30年后的今天，我们今天在反思的说，我们不喜欢现在我们的产业结构，我们不喜欢我们现在的经济结构，因为它太沉重了。如果从环境影响方面，从碳的角度来讲，我们自己觉得这个太重。
China and the world, in fact, is consuming too many resources and eating up food, using too much water, burning too much fuel at a rate where stocks are being run down very quickly. A great deal of pressure is being put on the land and on river systems, and as a result, fuel prices are rising, and also we're seeing climate change. These are all manifestations of overuse of resources.
那么在这个过程当中呢，我们基本上说，由于它快速，仅仅在30年的时间里面，我们发展了，经济的确是发展了，但是环境问题全都集聚在这30年当中呢去体现出来。所以呢，我们的结果是什么？我们不单有西方发达国家可能150年前、200年前工业化刚刚开始的时候起步的那些最传统的这种污染的这种情况，我们是有的。同时呢，由于这个速度之快，我们用了30年的时间，走了人家讲200年的路，所以我们就有现代的一些化学这种各种污染也混在其中。所以中国今天的这个环境的这种灾难也好，环境的重负也好，已经重的说没有任何一个国家在就人类历史上说经历过同样的或者相似的这种情形。
I've seen the incredibly dry areas in the north where droughts in many places are getting worse. I've seen dried up lake beds. I've been to coal mines, and you look at the local mining communities where people are suffering problems with breathing, they're suffering the pollution of their waterways, so they have health problems. And I've been to many cancer villages where the water is sometimes red, sometimes yellow, sometimes black, smells awful, and the people who live nearby are increasingly prone to cancer. And I could go on, but the absolute crux of all of these issues, I think, is water and the overuse of water. And if there is a real threat facing China's future economic growth, it is that it will literally dry up.
这个的里头面的水了嘛，装起来了嘛。如果是天年正常了嘛，我们下面这些旱地里全部都安了地管，可以下个再严重苞谷都可以破，有水了嘛。像今年了没得水了，也就是就用不上了。
Sustainability is something that we try to weave into everything we do. I think it's pretty well established now that sustainability is important. We've all seen the news about the environment, and most of that news these days is bad. Whether that's huge areas of forest dying in Canada, for example, because of the raising of the average temperatures. All we have to do in China is look out the window and see that there are big challenges in terms of the environment. So as architects, as planners, as interior designers, we can try to change that.
China is an amazing phenomena at the moment, and you could argue that it is working at the highest level of innovation, as there's never been a phenomena of so many people coming from the countryside into cities. So the urbanization that is happening in China is extremely innovative. The way towers are built, the speed of dealing with all these problems is mind-boggling. And who is doing the most on that front will at the end of the day hold the key to the world. And there I think China is very, very far advanced.
You can't really have a future that's not sustainable. And if you want truly sustainable solutions for the global middle class, then it will pretty much be like this, that suburbia tends to be less sustainable because it's based on cars, as we see it in the States. And you simply can create and design better solutions if you have many people in smaller spaces. So cities seems to be going hand in hand, you could say, with sustainability thinking.
Our observation on sustainable design right now is that it's a very difficult thing. We know very little about it right now, and we don't have the final solution for final sustainability of the world. I mean, imagine the scale of a sustainable city for millions of people. It's a very big design, and it's not easy to do. But we're trying now, and the world is trying, and it will be better, and we will learn for these things we try out now, and they will be final products or final cities in the next decades.
I think Mazda is probably one of the most ambitious but also important projects of the last decade. The reason for that is that we talked about architecture and solar engineering for a moment, but the real problem is actually to solve the city. How all people coming from the countrysides, coming to the cities, live together will be one of our biggest challenges. So I think the battle, if you look at it as a big battle, the battle for sustainability will be decided in the cities. If you can develop sustainable cities, then the world will win. If you don't find a solution for cities, we will all lose. And for that you have to look at a very complicated model of density, how dense are your cities, how the transport works in cities, how the food production, how food comes to the city, how energy collection happens in the city, is it centralized or decentralized? It's incredibly complex. You know, when people talk about computer systems and you have to predict the weather forecast and the weather forecast in a year or 2 years' time, you realize the computer power doesn't even exist at the moment. And the integration level for a city is almost as complicated. Whether Mazda succeeds or not is to be seen, but it is the most important research on the city that we have right now.
Yeah, well, I think that really China today is one of the most exciting countries on the planet for what is happening, especially if you look at cities. I believe that China is building more cities than all of humanity ever built. And you see also some things that, you know, where one can have a concrete action for air quality, for the way people move, for improving traffic conditions. So I think the drivers in the things at stake and you know, what could be done in China is incredible.
Yes, we have 2 projects ongoing in China. One in Jiangxi province, Kunxing, and the other in Jiangsu province, Danyang. And both projects are so-called uncompromised model cities for the urbanization of China. This is something which has never before happened in that scale.
I think as an industry, sustainability is definitely going to grow in China. As far as eco-cities themselves, it depends on how many more cities are built in China. At some point they may reach a point where they don't need new cities, rather they're going to revise the existing cities. But for right now, China plans many new cities, and those are the opportunities for them to be highly energy efficient and very sustainable. Those are the eco-cities.
Sustainability is about time. You want to do something now that the next generation will not be harmed, but in a positive way that the next generation can still enjoy. I would say buildings that are going to last in Berlin is the Reichstag. You have the Reichstag, which is the government, but on top of the Reichstag is the dome, which has become the symbol of not only democracy, but also of environmental architecture. And then there's another project which is in the university in Berlin, which is the Philological Library, which is a very interesting building, I find, because it's extremely energy efficient on the one hand, but on the other hand, I think it has an almost Zen-like quality when you're inside and we're experiencing it as a reading room. What is the perfect way of reading in a room with a lot of other people? I think you don't want to look at another person. I think you want to look at something that will take your mind and you can drift away with your mind. That's why we have this fabric that glows and has the clouds projected on it. On the other hand, you want all your books near you. So that's why the library has, on one hand, the people looking out at this light wall, and on the other hand, the books straight behind them. I think you will find in the future there will be a convergence of people who are technically minded, who want to make their buildings perform better environmentally, and people who let's call it just trendy designers. And at the end of the day, there won't be technical or design, there will be one beautiful architecture where the environmental and the beauty are in harmony.
我觉得好的建筑一定能够提升那个大部分的这个人们的这个生活的品质，这是一定的。因为本身建筑存在的意义是什么？本身建筑就是生活的载体，建筑和这个日常的生活一定是密不可分的。当然，比如说我们就拿自然博物馆的这样的一个建筑，这样一个项目来举例子。对于上海市来说，我觉得应该说我们给这个城市带来了一种非常新的一个公共建筑的一种观念。也就是说，新的公共建筑的意义，我觉得不仅仅是在说创造一个这个形象上的一个地标，而是怎么样通过这些公共建筑提供一种空间，提供一种载体，让人们到这边来可以受到教育。我觉得这个是最重要的。那么我们设计的这个自然博物馆，通过我们的设计，我们可以让人们到这儿来体验这个自然的这样的一种演变的历史，甚至说通过我们的建筑空间的这样的一种设计，参观者在这个博物馆里头可以随时和自然发生互动，那么可以体验到这样的人和自然这样的一种关系。所以建筑变成一个教育的载体，我觉得这个是真正的意义。
It's a beautiful design, sort of a curving shape, reminiscent of a nautilus shell. And the roof is a green roof that slopes up from the landscaping and curves around on the top of the building. Green roof allows us to collect stormwater for reuse. It adds insulation and thereby reduces energy use. We have some interesting ventilation aspects to it, which allow us to reduce the use of air conditioning. We paid a lot of attention to natural daylighting, getting more daylight into the building from all sides at all times of year, so that we can reduce the amount of artificial lighting.
其实我个人觉得，就是绿色节能的这样的一种理念，包括可持续发展、永续发展这样的一种观念，我觉得其实一直在这个中国的文化里面。因为中国人，比如说中国一直讲天人合一，天人合一的意思其实就是人和自然之间应该创造一种和谐的一个关系。
So first, architects cannot be merely designers of two-dimensional facades or three-dimensional architectural objects. We have to become designers of ecosystems.
Typically, the whole question of sustainability is quite often misconceived as a question of some kind of a moral sacrifice, that we have to sort of how much of our existing life quality are we prepared to sacrifice in order to become sustainable? Essentially, like this idea that it has to hurt to do good. And I think where we architects have a role to play is to try to find ways of accommodating the way people want to live, but in smarter ways. So the sustainability is not a moral sacrifice or a political dilemma, but a design challenge. The general idea is that if something is ecologically sustainable, but economically unsustainable, it just simply costs too much. It's never going to create massive change. It might be funded for a while, or when people have some philanthropical resources, they can put it after it. But in the big picture, it's never going to create anything because it's going to die out of money. An example that is economically sustainable is a project we're doing in Copenhagen, which is a waste-to-energy plant that to sort of introduce the element of hedonism or like social sustainability. We propose that instead of just having it as a big box that casts shadows on the neighbors and blocks the view, to enjoy the fact that we actually have cold weather in Denmark, we have snow, but we don't have hills. Copenhagen is as flat as a pancake. So we made the roof of this factory into a man-made ski slope for alpine skiing. So in 2016, if you visit Copenhagen, you can actually see how trash turns into energy and money, and how a big factory turns into a skiing park for the citizens of Copenhagen.
Københavns nyeste kvarter, Ørestaden, er tænkt som en moderne udgave af Frederiksstaden. En helt ny by opført på bar mark. Og for nylig blev vi bedt om at tegne et nyt hus, eller snarere 2 nye huse, nemlig en kæmpe karré og et lille tårn. Hvis vi prøver ligesom at zoome mere ind på den, så er vores opgave simpelthen i den her karré at tegne 500 boliger og 400 arbejdspladser. Faktisk er det så stort, at det står og vipper på kanten mellem at være en bygning og være byplanlægning. Altså et helt kvarter, som er opført på én gang som et hus.
My involvement is very much in the sort of trying to establish what should this project really be all about. We test different ideas. The different team members proposes ideas. I sometimes also have some ideas that I propose, and they get sort of materialized in models, as you can see, and in drawings. We pin up everything. All of our studies either come out as a physical model or as something you can print out and look at and discuss and decide. We're interested in innovation. We want to discover new things. But the way you get there is not by starting from scratch. It's essentially by trying to acquire as much knowledge that has already been created. It's trying to get as much information to inform your design. And then from there, essentially you can jump much higher if you're standing on the shoulders of your predecessors. So of course you become a better architect by studying architecture. Want to see, is this idea really innovative? Is there a breakthrough, a conceptual breakthrough? Right. I often ask myself if there's something for the copiers to copy. If you're just doing the same thing as everybody else, but you're doing it in your own style, there's nothing for other people to copy unless they copy your style. But if you actually have a fundamental breakthrough, they can take that component of your design and they can do it in their own way with their own expression. With Audi last year, trying to look at the future of urban mobility, and specifically we fell in love with the idea that we seem to be at the brink of the advent of the driverless car. 15 years, a series of breakthroughs are leading towards the driverless car. And actually, as we were working on the project, Google announced that they had been driving around San Francisco Bay Area with driverless cars for quite a while. We're trying to sort of look at all these different ideas where the simple invention of the driverless car could have a massive impact on our cities. Suburbs, then he drives to town, and instead of parking his car, he just get out of the car where he works, and then the car drives around, maybe even as a taxi service during the day, and when he wants to go home, he beeps the car and it comes and picks him up.
Yeah, the vehicle design program at the RCA is a very interesting program. It's been running now for 40 years, so it was one of the first programs in Europe to start doing car design. There's obviously, in the course, there's a lot of interest in designing electric cars and battery cars, and I think that reflects a growing interest and a growing amount of electric cars that we're seeing on the road. Traditionally, electric cars are being quite expensive to buy. We think about cars like the Tesla that are equivalent to a Lotus Elan and cost about £80,000. And I think we're getting to a point where electric cars now are becoming very accessible to people.
Our first car was the Tesla Roadster that I'm sitting on right here. It's a great demonstration of electric vehicle technology. The first task before us when we set out to develop this company was to solve some of the essential problems, historical problems with electric vehicles, principally around battery and energy storage.
From a design perspective, there's a lot of really interesting challenges and opportunities in designing electric cars. You're moving away from a conventional engineering package into something where you can put the batteries in different places, you can move the engines around, so you can create new architecture, not just new shape. And that is very exciting, I think, for students. So we have a project from a Chinese student, Chen Dai, who's looked at the issue of how you might use a small footprint vehicle that can travel between lanes of a conventional motorway or street. So it forms a total crossover between a motorcycle and a car. It offers very good weather protection, comfort and safety, but it's actually half the size of a car in width, so it can get through traffic lanes in the same way a motorcycle can.
Sports car has many benefits. It changes the perception of what electric vehicles can be, because historically electric vehicles have tended to be small, compromised vehicles, if you will, not terribly exciting or sexy. It's also, a sports car is a terrific way to demonstrate the inherent comparative benefits of an electric motor. Electric motor generates full torque from 0 RPM, so you can get extraordinary acceleration out of an electric car. And the Tesla Roadster does 0 to 60 in 3.7 seconds, and to put that in context, there's probably one Ferrari in the world that performs on a better basis than the Tesla Roadster.
So on this floor we build a battery pack for the Roadster as well as for the Daimler cars that we build car transport. So this is the design studio. This is where a customer can design their own Roadster. This is a touchscreen experience, and I can design my Roadster here. See it in any color I want. On the left here is the universal mobile connector, and that plugs into a 240 volt outlet. This is a standard 110 volt outlet, and that connector there will plug into that. So you can plug in your Roadster anywhere there's electricity. This is the trunk of the car, this space here. This is the battery pack directly behind the seat. This is the power electronics module, and that's actually directing the electricity into and out of the battery pack. And underneath the power electronics module is the motor and the gearbox. And so the car actually has two latches, one on either side. So you close it just like that.
The long-range development of the company is to really expand the market for EVs, to deliver ultimately mass-market EVs. This has set the table for us brilliantly, but by next year, 2012, we'll be introducing a sedan, a full-size sedan, half the price, more than twice the utility. We're getting to mass-market EVs in that fashion.
20 years ago in Copenhagen, they had plenty of cars. And if you go to Copenhagen today, you see that most transportation actually happens on bicycles. In a certain sense, Copenhagen has done the opposite that China has done in the past 20 years. In the past 20 years, Beijing has gone from a city of bicycles to a city of cars. And Copenhagen has gone from a city of cars to a city of bicycles. That was done through policy, through a number of other things, and now, today, almost half of the trips that people do every day are done by bicycle.
Biomega is a bicycle company, to say it very simply, but it's a design-driven company as well, and the idea came out of wanting to have more bikes in the city. The way of getting people on bikes is by making them want to go on, not want them to go on something else. How we contribute to sustainable design is to make it hedonistic, so that people like green design, and the other is to make it aesthetically sustainable. So if you make an object, and even if it's a very good object, if you don't like it anymore, you will throw it out, even if it could last 100 years. So the ability to make products that last very long, not only like in terms of physically how long they can last, but in terms of emotionally how long they can be adorable to people. That is how I think we can contribute. So I've looked at the car industry and seen how can they successfully take possession of 99% of all the world's capitals. They are the dominant means of transport in cities. So most people think it's because of functionality, and I for sure think it's not. If you look at a bike and compare it to a car, the bike is normally functionally advantageous. So it's normally much faster, and also it's cheaper, it's healthier. I mean, if you go through the list, you will find that it's a more advantageous means of transport. So I think it's something else that does it, and that thing is that you can communicate who you are with a car, and you cannot do that with a bike. So that is the aim of Biomega, is to allow people to express their personality through the bike, and thereby gain ground in the city.
解决了它一个环保问题，这也属于新能源公共交通的一种。
Solar started in '98. I got a solar cell, and in that time I was fascinated by the material and its beauty. At that time they were mainly used for architectural purposes, so you put them on the roof to make electricity for your home. And I always thought it was a bit sad because you couldn't quite tell what the solar energy was doing, because the light looked the same, the toaster looked the same, everything worked the same, and I wasn't quite sure what actually came from the roof from my fantastic solar collector and what came from the power plant. So we tried to think of a product what would ultimately explain and seduce society that solar not only works but is also fantastically enjoyable and actually better. So we came up with the idea of a boat. So we had this visual of a boat in the middle of a lake, no cables attached, so it's clear, it's purely driven by the kind of power from the sun. And we wanted to create an experience which is so beautiful that you don't feel like, okay, yeah, I should go solar. It's more like you want to have this boat. It's a seductive product. And that's how it started.
The solar shuttle can run for 4 to 5 days without any direct sunlight. And during the course of a year, will save approximately 4,900 pounds of CO2 emissions. And of course, it's not just the emissions we need to think about, it's noise pollution as well, because the boat runs completely silently and vibration-free. So you really are, when you go for a ride, you're on a lovely tranquil platform that glides around the Serpentine. When we first got the boat on the lake, there was quite a lot of interest, and we thought, well, this is because it's new. But I must say, whenever I or some of the other captains are driving the boat around, we notice that people are constantly taking photographs of it. And because of the nature of the design and the striking roof, it is a beautiful object that attracts a lot of attention.
People talk about sustainability, or they talk about alternative design. And I hear these words, I always go like, oh, stop, stop, stop. Because for me, yes, alternative means you go into a shop, you want this pair of shoes, and say, no sir, you can't have that, but we have this alternative, which is normally the uglier, not so nice version. That's not what sustainable design is. Sustainable design has to be better. We have to think about how it's produced, we have to think about how the product gets from the production to the consumer. We have to think about what happens after the consumer doesn't want to use it anymore. And we have to think about how to engage the consumer in the product that he uses, not just for 1 year, but for 2 years, but for 3 years. So we have to do all of these things. But at the end of the day, the product has to be better. It has to be more exciting, more fun to use, work better. It just has to be a better product. So sustainability is not an excuse for bad or ugly designs. Sustainability is just something which we need to think about, the same as a chair which is comfortable to think or sit in, and all of these matters before.
An interesting innovation that has come out in the last few years is 3D printing. Now you can have your computer connected to another machine which looks like a Xerox machine, and out of it you get the three-dimensional object. So for architects and designers, that is the best thing that ever happened to us. We can have an idea, we can think about it, we can draw it on the computer, we push the button, and a few hours later it comes out in 3 dimensions.
So we're here in our 3D printing room, and we have about 6 printers. In our design process, we often use computers, of course, digital design tools, but also physical models. I think it's about 50% physical models and digital models. Now, we often make these physical models by just cardboard, a bit of foam, cutting and gluing stuff together. Now, about 5 or 6 years ago, we're getting to a point where the models we designed were so complex that it wasn't quick enough anymore to make them by cardboard or foam. So we had to find a different way of representing our digital models physically. I have an exact copy of this in my computer. It's a digital model, and this is the exact physical representation of it. And I haven't done this by hand, this is done basically by machine. What a computer does before it sends it to the 3D printer is it slices this up in tiny, tiny slices digitally. And sends these slices, so I probably have about 1,000 slices for this model, sends these slices over to this machine, which is basically a little bit like an inkjet printer. Instead of using ink, I'm going to use glue. So what happens is, the first layer is, I'll get a thin layer of powder, the inkjet comes over my layer and actually starts printing, the first layer, which is probably something like this shape. So it does it for every layer. So in the end, I will have a vat with loose powder, and somewhere in there, I've got a little solid model.
In the future, I think you will be able to print pieces for buildings. I can see a future not so far away where there are big machines, they just print the building. And you're finished. You don't have to put pieces together, they print the entire building or just pieces of it. There is a research project which is so far a secret, but the concept is that you send 3D printers to the moon. So there are little machines, you send them to the moon and they use special chemicals, glue and moon dust to print the buildings that astronauts can live in on the moon. So in a real future, you can have a machine just printing its next baby machine, which then can print another one and another one and another one. That's the future for you.
I'm Marcus Kaiser and I'm a product designer. I've done the Solar Sinter, which is a 3D printer that uses sunlight and sand as energy and material. So it's a kind of questioning the idea of desert manufacture, or questioning manufacturing, but really looking at the possibility or the potential of using this energy and material. So these are the first experiments that I'm showing right now here. The goal of this piece really is the potential, I think. It's just showcasing a potential of desert manufacturing, and I think it's not giving definite answers at the moment. I think it's really a start for fresh thinking. It's a point of departure. I think sustainability is part of most design today, and any design practice, I think, tries to include that, because it's part of the future of this world, I guess. So I think it's really an important part in any design, and my design has a big part of it is maybe sustainable, but also I think it's really about this potential and about manufacturing, that it's not only about that, it's about questioning what manufacturing is today. My future plans for this project are to develop the Solar Sinter further, as I only had 3 weeks in the desert to test and experiment with the existing device now. So I have many plans of making it much better, and I know much more after this short experimenting period to improve a lot of things, whether it's programming or some mechanical parts. So yeah, this is what I want to do, and also look for opportunities to develop it on a larger scale.
Innovation starts after the normal things, from my opinion. If you want to show really good innovation, you have to go over the border, to ignore rules. I find here some projects that they do with strawberry juice, solar panels. And this is for me really innovation.
Sunny Memories is a project about a new kind of solar cell. We started from a new technology of solar energy, where it's a colorant which transforms light into electricity. It's inspired by what happened in the plant with the photosynthesis. So at the end, you get a solar cell where you can play with the colors, you can play with the shape, you can play with transparency, and even with the flexibility.
I just have to put it 3 minutes inside, and then the juice is absorbed by the white layer. Then I will take just a few drops of this product, which is electrolyte, and then just connecting the both surfaces together. So the electrolyte is making the contact between the both. And then I just put it under the light. And here the little wing is turning with the power of the raspberry juice.
There are some projects which are directly usable right now, and that was really important, that we are not about dreaming, we're also about design doing, like the power supplier for the cell phone or some of the solar garden lamps. What I also like is that there are also some projects who redefine the use of the solar cells by putting, for instance, some fabrics on top of the solar cells. Here it's a cushion where you can connect your computer, your laptop, and it continues to work. And that's something that you cannot experience with other solar cells. We have a mailbox. There's a solar cell on the top of this mailbox, and when you put inside a letter, it sends you automatically on your cell phone an email or an SMS. You've got a mail.
For me, it's good design if it's not only form and function. For me, it's also important that the product tell you a story, that you like to use the product, that you have a relation to the product. This is for me really good design.
Sustainability and sustainable design is key. You cannot today design about the product without thinking about it and without considering it. It's very important how you define it. Sustainability is not some marketing spiel. It's not that you just do something out of recycled waste and create a product which nobody wants. You have to be very honest. You have to be very honest about the product, the value you create, how long this product will be around, how much energy you use in its creation, what materials you use. All of these factors are important to consider.
Every project we look at, whether they have a sustainability focus or whether they don't, have an opportunity to simply be better, to do better. This is called the Clever Little Bag for Puma, and it's a shoebox. It's a shoebox that uses 65% less materials, 65% less energy to be made. That's being used by Puma, shipping 80 million shoes around the world. So when people get the shoes, this gets recycled and reuse the bag for other things. You know, this is a 3.5-year long project. These are not easy things to do, but this is game-changing work. There's certainly a lot of challenges in the world in general. At the same time, those challenges are the biggest opportunity that design has to be relevant in the coming 20 years.
The answer to environmental problems, it has to involve a change of behaviour at an individual level, thinking more about the way we consume, not wasting things, not aspiring just to the biggest and fastest all the time, but maybe to the most efficient and to the most sustainable.
I'm very excited about the grassroots movement happening all over in New York. Local food, composting, bicycling, energy generation, education, all of these things are just taking off all over the place. So it's a very important part of the movement, and as you can see at this fair, there's lots of great examples.
It's essentially a change of thinking in the way we consider growth. It shouldn't just be material growth. It needs to be qualitative growth, growth that leads to health, longevity, rather than, as we're increasingly seeing in the world, growth for the sake of growth's sake that leads to obesity and tumours and stress and conflict. That is where I think grassroots organisations can do a very important, very effective job.
共同发起的一个叫百万森林这样的项目。那么在这个过程当中呢，我们是希望说用一个非常简单的概念，也就是说5块钱一棵沙棘树的这么一个简单的概念呢，让大家跟我们一起合作捐赠这些树。当然，捐赠是一个简单的行为，但是这里面传递的理念是非常非常重要的。也就是说，其实呢，每一个人都可以参与到解决应对气候变化的行列当中来，未必是说我必须很有钱，或者我必须有个这个高端的技术。相反，每一个公众都可以参与。
Individuals have a role to play. Grassroots organisations have a very important role to play in showing their alternative lifestyles, exploring alternative lifestyles, educating students and school children that they don't necessarily have to aspire to the Hollywood, Barbie lifestyle of you know, huge houses and huge cars and shopping trips every day.
I think it's really critical for people to just look around them and think it could be better, and they can try to make a change.
China in the last 100 years has shown that it is a country capable of changing dramatically and quickly.
There's a lot to do, a lot to change, a lot of people's thought processes have to be shifted, you know. They have to think in terms of saving the planet, in terms of the air we breathe and the food we eat.
What's really needed is more focus on culture, education, creativity, finding new ways of living, and that's very much about design. It's about the arts. It's about religion, if you like.
And when China embraces sustainability in full force, it's going to be the biggest in the world. So I'm very excited to be at the very beginning of it right now.
The hand of the devil, and he kept us awake with closed teeth, sharing different heartbeats in one life. To call for hands above, to lead